Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today we are diving into one of the most fascinating developments in the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. A shift that few could have predicted, but many now recognize as a pivotal factor. For centuries, Russia relied on the brutal cold of winter as its greatest ally, a force that crushed Napoleon's army and halted Hitler's advance. But this time, history seems to be taking a different turn. The legendary General Winter that once shielded Russia has seemingly betrayed it, offering Ukraine new opportunities to strike back and gain momentum in ways that defy tradition and expectations. The concept of General Winter is deeply ingrained in Russian history, a narrative that has always cast the cold as an unbeatable defender of the homeland. When vast armies marched into Russia, it wasn't just soldiers and weapons that decided the battles. It was the unforgiving weather that sapped morale, froze supplies, and destroyed logistics. Napoleon's retreat from Moscow and Hitler's stalled Operation Barbarossa are two of the most famous examples. Russian strategy for centuries leaned on the inevitability of winter to tilt the battlefield in its favor. But today, with modern warfare, drones, precision, guided artillery, and energy infrastructure at the center of conflict, the advantage has shifted dramatically. Ukraine has learned to weaponize winter in a way that undermines Russian forces and flips the old script on its head. One of the most crucial aspects of this reversal is logistics. Russia entered the war believing its massive supply chains and stockpiles would overwhelm Ukraine, especially when winter set in. Yet, what we see now is that those long convoys and overstretched supply routes become prime targets for Ukrainian drones and artillery. The very terrain that was once Russia's advantage has turned into a liability. Mud, snow, and ice slow down heavy Russian armor and fuel trucks, making them easy targets. Meanwhile, Ukraine, relying on more agile units, lighter vehicles, and advanced Western technology, can strike with precision and withdraw before Russia can respond effectively. Ukraine also benefits from modern winter gear and Western support. NATO allies have supplied not just weapons but cold weather uniforms, heating equipment, and mobile infrastructure that allow Ukrainian troops to remain resilient in freezing conditions. Compare this to Russian conscripts who often face shortages of basic equipment, poorly insulated clothing, and inadequate rations, and the difference becomes clear. Winter no longer favors the nation with sheer numbers. It favors the one with preparation, adaptability, and outside backing. Ukraine's forces are not just surviving winter, they are thriving in it. Another factor is the energy war. Russia once believed that weaponizing gas supplies and blacking out Ukraine's grid would bring Kiev to its knees during the cold months. But Ukraine has adapted. Through distributed energy systems, rapid repairs, and international aid, Ukraine has managed to stabilize much of its energy network despite Russian bombardment. At the same time, Europe, once heavily dependent on Russian gas, has reduced its reliance and diversified its energy sources, denying Moscow the leverage it once enjoyed. Instead of crushing morale, Russia's attacks have hardened Ukraine's resolve and strengthened European unity. This is another way General Winter has turned against Moscow. Technology is reshaping the battlefield. In the past, Winter immobilized armies, forcing them into defensive positions until the thaw. Now, drones, satellite intelligence, and long-range precision strikes mean that the fighting never really stops, regardless of weather. Ukrainian drones equipped with thermal imaging can identify targets in snow-covered fields and forests with striking accuracy. Artillery guided by satellite data can strike Russian positions at night in sub-zero temperatures. The cold no longer grants Russia a pause. It simply provides Ukraine with a clearer canvas upon which to paint its strikes. Morale is another key aspect. Russian troops, often drafted unwillingly or sent with minimal preparation, are forced to endure freezing trenches, inadequate medical care, and a lack of proper supplies. Ukrainian soldiers, fighting for their homeland, not only withstand the same conditions but often do so with higher morale and stronger community support. The psychological toll of winter has historically been devastating, but now it appears to weigh more heavily on Russia than on Ukraine. Soldiers who expected to be sheltered by history's most formidable ally, winter, now feel betrayed by it. Symbolically, the idea of General Winter turning against Russia is more than just battlefield analysis. It represents a broader shift in the narrative of this war. Russia's reliance on old strategies, old myths, and old assumptions has clashed with Ukraine's embrace of adaptability, innovation, and resilience. History no longer guarantees Russia's survival. It instead reminds the world that nothing is permanent and no ally is unshakable. For Ukraine, this symbolic reversal becomes a weapon in itself, inspiring its people and demonstrating to international backers that the tide of history can be bent with determination. When we examine recent campaigns, we see this clearly. Ukrainian strikes on supply depots, fuel storage, and railway hubs are particularly effective in winter. Snow makes tracks and vehicle movements visible from drones, and the slowing of Russian resupply efforts compounds the logistical nightmare. Every missed fuel truck, every destroyed ammunition warehouse, and every stalled tank convoy becomes magnified in the winter months. Instead of grinding Ukraine down, winter is grinding Russia's war machine. Internationally, this shift also changes perceptions. The myth of Russia's invincible winters is fading, replaced by the image of a country struggling against both an opponent and the very climate it once mastered. For decades, the world believed invading Russia in winter was a fool's errand. Now, the question is whether Russia itself can endure winter against Ukraine. This not only affects military planning, but also global opinion, as narratives of Russian dominance collapse under the weight of modern realities. Ukraine's resilience in winter also fuels continued Western support. Donor countries see that Ukraine is capable of withstanding harsh conditions and maintaining offensive operations. This strengthens arguments for sending more aid, more advanced systems, and more logistical backing. The stronger Ukraine appears in winter, the weaker Russia looks, and the greater the willingness of the international community to invest in Ukraine's eventual victory. Looking ahead, the lessons of this betrayal by General Winter are profound. Warfare has evolved beyond the simple influence of climate. Technology, preparation, and adaptability now define the true balance of power. For Russia, relying on myths of the past has proven disastrous. For Ukraine, embracing innovation and refusing to be cowed by history has opened new doors. Winter is no longer a predictable ally. It is a variable that can be turned into an advantage by those who prepare best. This also reshapes how we think of strategy. Military leaders around the world will study this war not just for the tactics on the ground, but for the transformation of symbolic forces into practical outcomes. What was once seen as an unchangeable law of war has been rewritten. The betrayal of Russia by its greatest historical ally demonstrates that no advantage is eternal, and no assumption can remain unchallenged in the face of modern innovation. In closing, the image of General Winter betraying Russia is powerful because it captures both the reality of the battlefield and the symbolic weight of history turning upside down. Ukraine has managed to turn one of Russia's greatest strengths into a weakness, reshaping the course of the war in ways that no one could have fully predicted. As the cold months continue, the world will be watching closely to see how Ukraine leverages this momentum and whether Russia can adapt to a new reality where its oldest friend, the winter itself, no longer fights on its side. This war has shown us that history is not destiny, and myths can be shattered by determination, resilience, and innovation.